Dear learners, Namaskar. I am Dr. Amiteshwar Ratra, Associate Professor at STRIDE, IGNOU. Now we will discuss cognitive theory. This is part of MDE 412. In this session, we will focus on understanding cognitivism. What is cognitivism? We will study information processing theories and also Piaget's cognitive theory and its applications in instructional design. In this session, you will also become aware of learning, its processes according to Gestalt theory, information processing theory, and Jean Piaget's cognitive theory. Jean Piaget, as you would have heard the name, is a very popular, eminent psychologist in the field of cognitive psychology. Now, in this session, we will also focus on the ideas presented under cognitive theories and its actual applicability in the learning context. The applications of cognitive theories in the context of open and distance learning for designing instruction, developing learning tasks are discussed herewith. So you all would be able to relate activities and exercises which facilitate our understanding and application abilities and interactions with the materials and its usage in the daily life. Now you would also be able to understand the characteristics of cognitive perspective of learning, discuss the information processing theory, understand the long-term and short-term memories and its usages, and the implications of cognitive theories for designing instruction. Now we come over to the important question, what is cognitivism? Have we heard of cognitivism before this? Definitely, we all are aware of cognitive learning, and cognitivism becomes a part, is the internal process of learning, understanding, motivation, and retention. The mind is broad and complex into which event responses are absorbed. The brain and the mind are the center of an organism, changing and being changed by the environment in a reciprocal manner. It means that when we are interacting with the environment, we are ingraining something from the environment to our brains, taking something from the environment. At the same time, we are also responding to the environment. So it becomes a reciprocal manner. If in the classroom, the teacher asks the students to please answer this question. So if a student raises her hand, it's a reciprocal to what the environment was asking the students to do. So cognitive theorists stress the importance of unobservable processes or mental events that are involved in learning, and so these are thinking, memory, perceptions, intentions, and retentions, and emotions. So education psychologist Thomas Good and Jean Brophy refer to the cognitive theory as cognitive theorists recognize that much learning involves associations established through integrity, repetition. They also acknowledge the importance of reinforcement, although they stress its role in providing feedback about the correctness of responses over its role as a motivator. However, even while accepting such behavioristic concepts, cognitive theories view learning as involving the acquisition and reorganization of the cognitive structures through which human processes and store information. So this is a definition given by Good and Brophy about what is cognitive theory. Now we come over to the common meaning of cognition. In general parlance, cognition means knowing. In psychological theories, this includes the processes of thinking and learning. So cognitive theories consider how human beings organize, store and use information. That is the application of cognitive theories we use in our instructional designs later on. So we come over to understand that cognition also includes how we perceive and attend to things happening around us, and extending beyond these to the so-called higher order processes of remembering, reflective and creative thinking. the use of language and problem solving in various forms. Now over here we need to introspect for a minute. When we are talking of cognition includes how we perceive and understand things that are taking place around us, and also using memory and remember, because memory is being used because we are remembering, we are reflecting, we are doing creative thinking later on, which involves definitely the use of language that may be verbal or that may be non-verbal, and the use of problem solving at various forms it is used. So when we are asking in the classroom our students about say some question about what is instruction, so maybe some students are able to answer them immediately and some may answer them. This could also depend that we had taught about instruction in the day before's classroom, and now the students are expected to remember what was discussed in the yesterday's session. So this is how we are using various processes of remembering. We can also say that if you have gone for a field work and have looked into some data, had discussed some issues with the persons in the field or had taken interviews, then you reflect upon whether what the persons were saying and how your own reactions were while taking the interview. So this is like we are using higher order processes of cognition, which would make the person reflect upon, use his or her own creative thinking, use his or her own creative thinking. So the language definitely comes into the rescue of this individual to express. Language helps into the expression of things, expression of feelings, expression of your own, how your memory is being reflected upon. So now with this we further move on to Gestalt psychology. The major historical roots of modern cognitive theories, as you understand, were laid by Gestalt psychology and the field theory of Kurt Lewin. To cognitive theorists, the essence of learning is perception of new relationships among the concepts. So learning is the rearrangement of what one knows and understands. Cognitive structures, goal-oriented behavior, and providing opportunities for intuitive thinking are being stressed upon in cognitive theories. Now, the cognitive psychologists believe that knowledge is organized in our mind into sections or groups, and each section of information is called a schema. So, what is schema? Schema is the small information of knowledge that we are learning or gaining from our environment every day, every now, every second. So knowledge is stored as linked ideas in our mind. As learning occurs, there is a change in the amount of knowledge as well as in the arrangement of information. Now, as you would understand that a small child, the amount of information or knowledge available would be much different to a person who is adult like you. So the amount of knowledge and information available to an adult person is much more, and then to somebody who is into the digital world might be much more. So the amount of information has to be linked with each other to form some accurate knowledge pattern. So thus we learn that the size and organization of a schemata changes from time to time. As our information and knowledge increases, so does our schemata in our brain increases. Now, the information processing theory and the work of cognitivists like Piaget, Brunner, Ausubel fall under the category of the cognitivist school of learning. In this session, we will not discuss Brunner and Ausubel. We will discuss Brunner and Ausubel in our next session on cognitivist theories. So, in this session, we will focus on information processing theory and Piaget's cognitive theory. So, now let us understand information processing theory. Now, what is information processing theory? As you would all know, that information processing theory emphasizes on the working of the mind. It attempts to account for the ways in which the learners receive, store, integrate, retrieve, and use information through the process of perception and memory. So perception and memory form the base of information processing theory. We have to understand that the learners receive information. Receive information could be like now you are receiving information through this video session. You would store it in your mind, integrate it with your previous information, the previous knowledge, then at a time appropriate, say for assignment or term and examination, you will retrieve the said information. Then you would be able to use that information through the process of perception and memory. Now thus it means that learning is thus viewed as a kind of information input which is stored until some future time when it is retrieved to be used in a similar or a different situation. So learning is thus viewed as a kind of information input which is stored until some future time when it is retrieved to be used in a similar or different situation. Now this would mean that the stages of information processing are thus we have to keep in mind the receiving, storing, integrating, retrieving, use of information through the process of perception and memory. Now we have to understand that information processing theory is not a single theory of learning. It is more a set of related terms and ideas that allow certain kinds of theory to be constructed. Information processing theory compares the human mind to a computer. We can see that the information processing theory emphasizes upon the cognitive mechanisms by which information is processed, that is, the active role of the learner, the importance of relating the knowledge which is already stored as new knowledge in the process of knowing. In their conception, the mind is the processing system in which knowledge is represented in the form of symbols, and processing is fundamentally symbol manipulation according to a set of rules. A variety of frameworks are used to characterize cognition and cognitive processes. These would be such as a computer language with the precisely defined syntax and a set of procedures. It could be graphic models such as flowcharts, designs, etc. that represent the temporal course of processing information and embody particular assumption of theories as to organize knowledge in the memory system. The higher order concepts such as plans, schemata, frames embody larger units of cognitive organization. The information processing view divides learning into three phases: attending new information, acquiring and retaining information, retrieving information from memory and transferring it to a new situation. So we should understand that information processing theory emphasizes on attending new information, that is gaining new information, acquiring and retaining information. We receive the information, we store the information, and then retrieving the information from memory and transferring it to a new situation as and when it is required. So when we are talking of information processing model is processed in a stepwise manner. The input from the senses first enters the sensory register, then it is processed in short-term memory, and then it is transferred to long-term memory for storage and later retrieval. When we are talking of sensory register, input is received from the senses, which lasts from less than a second to 4 seconds and then disappears through decay or replacement. And when we are registering things, it is like you show it in a flash and then you remove it. Then much of the information never becomes a part of short-term memory, but all information is monitored at some level and acted upon if necessary. Now, for example, when you sit quietly for at least 2 minutes and be aware of everything you can hear, smell, feel, taste, and you will realize how much is going on around you, how many different sounds you can hear, the range of feelings that can come in you, the taste and the smells you could experience without doing anything for 2 minutes. Now, the psychologists call these as sensory data. Now, what is short-term memory? The short-term memory is the sensory input that is important or interesting is transferred from the sensory register to the short-term memory. Then, from memory, it can be retained here for up to 20 seconds or more if viewed repeatedly. Short-term memory can hold up to 7 plus or minus 2 items. So it could be plus or minus 7. The short-term memory can be holding up the items in our brains. And the long-term memory capacity can be increased if the material is chunked into meaningful parts. So for the long-term memory, it is said that there is no limited capacity. If we are able to chunk the materials into related parts or meaningful parts, then the storage capacity of long-term memory is much higher. So as long-term memory has unlimited capacity, some materials are forced into long-term memory by rote memorization and overlearning. So as you see that some students are into rote memorization, and this leads to the learning going deeper into them. So the deeper levels of processing, such as generating linkages between old and new information, are also developed, and much better for the successful retention of material. Though as you all know, we emphasize that the students should do reflective writing rather than doing rote writing in examinations and in purposes of papers and materials to be developed. Now we come over to Jean Piaget's view of cognitive development. Jean Piaget, also known as Jean Piaget, as he is pronounced, was one of the 20th century's most influential researchers in the field of developmental psychology. Piaget was born in 1896 and till 1980 he was here. So Piaget's theory highlights the need for understanding the learner's level of cognitive development and designing the instruction accordingly. According to him, the learner should be given due importance or control place while planning the curriculum. Now we will discuss the important points related to designing instruction in correspondence with Piaget's theory of cognitive development. We have already heard the term schema. So the term schema comes again in his theory. Schema describes the way in which newly acquired knowledge and experience is organized and stored internally. Piaget considered a schema to be a mental category or structure which contains knowledge and experience that we possess pertaining to an object or occurrence. As our knowledge and experience increases, the schema changes and becomes more complex to accommodate different things that are coming up in the learning stimuli as a learning environment in the milieu. Now, how is knowledge organized in the mind? Piaget believed that in our mind, knowledge is organized into sections or groups which are called a schema. He suggested that there are several other processes associated with learning, and these are assimilation. Assimilation is what? It is the new information added to the existing schema. That is, during assimilation, we interpret the external worlds in terms of what we already know. Then comes the term accommodation. The schema are changed to include new information which does not fit into the existing schema. So the things that could not be assimilated for them, then it has to be an accommodation in our mind. We must change our beliefs to include this new knowledge system. We must adjust an old schema or create new ones after noticing that our current thinking does not capture or explain our new experiences. So the next term that Piaget used was organization. And organization is that when we start thinking about information gathered, the new schemas we are learning, interacting, the different schemas, the different processes that are taking place, then we start creating links between these different schemas. Then for this, we use the process called organization, the internal rearrangement and linking together of schemas form a strongly interacted cognitive system. For example, you would think that about a subject you know well. You will be able to link lots of different topics. The thought processes that help you to make these links are called organization. The next term that Piaget used was on equilibrium. According to Piaget, there has to be a balance between assimilation and accommodation. It is necessary that the developing student's efficient interaction with the environment takes place, and this can be only held when there is equilibrium of the different schemas that are accumulated in the brain. Then another term comes in over here, that is disequilibrium. Now this is a state of conflict between one's existing knowledge and the new experience. It is a state of imbalance between assimilation and accommodation. Now when disequilibrium occurs, that is the time when the new schemas, the new information, the new knowledge that has been gained settles down in our brains and thereupon leading to further equilibrium. After disequilibrium, equilibrium has to take place to ensure the developing students' efficient interactions with the environments, to emphasize that there is a balance between assimilation and accommodation later on. Now, let us come over to the applications of Piaget's theory to instructional design. Now, Piaget has emphasized and laid a major impact on education, especially at the preschool and early primary school levels. There are 4 important principles which underline Piaget's approach that can be used for designing instruction. Piaget's theory had a lot of emphasis for preschooler children and primary school children. So a lot of emphasis and usage of Piaget's theory has been on the children at this educational level. For the instructional design, while we are designing instructions, the Piaget's approach can be used such as that an emphasis on learning by discovery instead of presenting ready-made knowledge verbally should be done. The distance teachers and instructional designers, open and distance education learning specialists should provide a rich variety of activities to help students explore and discover relationships for themselves. So this is very important to provide, to have emphasis on learning by discovery. Then next is sensitivity to learners' readiness to learn. Piaget believed that appropriate learning experiences build on learners' current level of thinking. Distance teachers, instructional designers, open and distance education experts, learning experts should keep in mind a student's abilities, development to learn, and thereby introduce new experiences which will challenge the student's current ideas. So this is following the concept of disequilibrium, equilibrium through assimilation and accommodation. Now, next of his thought process was on acceptance of individual differences. The teachers, instructional designers, experts in the learning need to make an effort to arrange activities for individual students or groups of students rather than just presenting information for the whole group. So, though it is like in the distance education mode, it is the information given in the learning materials is for the whole group. So in creating individual differences can be done when we are asking the short-term questions in the end, or the student is expected to answer some questions given in the end of the unit or the chapter, and here some individual differences, how the student can take up one activity and may not take up the other activity, can be involved into. Then next is creating a learning environment. Piaget thought that the most effective method of helping students is to help their schema through the interaction with the peers. These interactions promoted cognitive conflicts so that students were more likely to change their existing schema through the processes of accommodation and assimilation. So with this, we come to an end of this session. And in this session, we learned about cognitivism. We studied about information processing theory. We studied about Piaget's cognitive development theory and its applications in instructional design. Now I, Dr. Amiteshwar Ratra, Associate Professor at STRIDE, IGNOU, says you bye, and we will meet again in another session for MDE 412. Namaskar.